we have a little bit more time in this 2-hour bracket to do this piece with grassroots. And we have a few things I really would like to get done today, which is I want to surface this concept of the 2 yardsticks by which we measure behavior. One is the Leave It to Beaver yardstick, that I like to call it that, where we wear this mask of what is good. And we judge our behavior and other people's behavior by what is good. And yet at the same time we make heroes and make myths out of ladies love outlaws, our bad boys. And how we can deal with this in an honest way. As Dave said, the children speak honestly and creatively. And as Connie says, if you walk in that honesty and creativity, then you can function. As Stacy says, when you embrace somebody in an act like that, they feel welcomed into the community, and the need to act that way changes. So that was going to be part of my talk today, and I didn't honestly feel I could be a good moderator as well as deliver that. So I'm going to turn this around and ask this as a question to the panel. And my question for the panel is, how, I've written this down, I want your thoughts on how to bring balance between these 2 extremes. And they call it in the Jewish tradition Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Din, the evil inclination, the good inclination. The Chinese tradition, yin and yang. In our society, I think it's the passion for freedom balanced with the rule of law. So how do we bring these 2 extremes expressions in our society in such a way to be honest with one another about our real passion for freedom in a country which prides itself on the rule of law? So I'd like to open that to the panel if anybody has some comments to make how they would do that. And I'd ask, unfortunately, you could be brief.
I could just say one thing, that I feel that the rule of law in its pure form is the rule of natural law. That we have a system, a justice system that's set up in this country to, the Supreme Court is to bring the supreme law of the land. I've just been in Washington hanging around all this stuff, and it's all there, all the words are there. And the rule of law is, in my opinion, the rule of natural law. That's where we're going. And then the freedom of the individual and the rule of law will be one to take us to great heights. But meanwhile, we're at the dichotomy of this heart within us that seeks to be free, this country that has said we are the model of profound freedom, and then we have this system of basically contaminated man-made law that we are rubbing up against. And what happens is, at this point, our boys who have rubbed up against this law, this outlaw model, and this Leave It to Beaver perfect model, what happens is you walk outside the Leave It to Beaver model and you get slammed. And that's where these boys are, and where this incarceration is the fallout between these 2 models.
I agree. Would anybody else like to speak to this? I want to open, and the other thing I want to get accomplished is I'm sure there's many sentiments bubbling up within the group, and I'd like to be able to address those.
I just have a very, very quick comment, which is that to bring the perfect standards of society and the rules of law and justice, and bring it together with people being able to be free and do what they want, the Leave It to Beaver model, you can't expect that from anyone. Nobody can be perfect. It just isn't possible. And the thing is we have to realize that not every person is the same, and not everything is going to work for the same person, and therefore we can't just put down, I think if you do something, as long as it supports you and you are fine with it and you truly in your heart believe it's okay, if it doesn't affect someone else in a negative way, if it doesn't hurt anything or anyone, it's okay. But I don't think you can put down what's necessarily right and wrong in black and white for any single person as a society.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to move around here. I'll just go this way around the room, and I'd like to hear a little bit from anybody that feels moved to do so.
Do you want to stand?
Yeah, let's stand.
Thank you, everyone. You all touched my heart today. And I feel a lot of tears and sadness even in this moment, because Aspen has been my home for 34 years. I was a high school student here, and I now have 3 teenage daughters that I'm raising in this community. And what happened with these boys, although none of them were personally my children, I feel that all the children of the community are my children. And I feel a very great sense of loss that we as a community were not able to keep our boys at home and do this healing at home, that we chose instead to ship our quote-unquote problems out. When many people, including myself and many others in this room, stepped forward at the time, we have amazing resources in this community. And they did step forward and offered to mentor and guide, and even for those people who understand discipline as a form of teaching as opposed to punishment, to discipline and rehabilitate. I mean, all those resources were here and are here now. And if there's anyone who is in the system or felt victimized by these crimes, I can say that I'm not coming from the standpoint of a bleeding heart liberal that doesn't understand what it's like to be a victim. I was a victim in this community of a very violent crime where someone broke into my apartment in the middle of the night, tried to rape me, and when I resisted, he beat me. And I was blinded in my left eye as a result of that. That person who hit me was as much a victim as I was, probably more so. He really was mentally disturbed and needed a lot of help. And he admitted to raping women and killing women from Florida to California. And he received no help from our system, and neither did those other victims. So I'm really for restorative justice, and I have a lot of compassion for the people who were victims of these crimes. And for me, what helped me get through that was to be able to face my assailant and be able to debunk the myth that he was this horrible monster out there somewhere that was going to show up in the middle of the night sometime, and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Instead, he became a human being that I could sit across from and try and understand how he could do something like that to me and what it was for him. And suddenly, I could relate to him. And I would ask anyone in this community to look inside and find the truth of the reflection of these boys and all other activities. It's not just these boys. Believe me, the situation, as Dave was saying, is continuing with the kids today. Punishment does not set an example and deter further activity. The activity is continuing with all ages and in all sectors of the community. And I just, for myself, look inside and see, where do I break in? Where do I steal? How do I do that? Where do I hit someone, even if it's just with a word? How do I do it? Can I find it in myself so that I can find it in my heart to see that they are me? And so for me, when you asked where do you bridge that gap between the Leave It to Beaver yardstick and the Ladies Love Outlaws, is, yeah, we are freedom-loving people. And it's human nature to expand, to grow, to want to learn, to reach out, to experiment. And when you're an infant, you put everything in your mouth, and it's one way in which you explore the world. And maybe you'll put something in your mouth that doesn't belong there. Maybe you'll choke. Maybe, it's poisonous. So we do our best to set up an environment for an infant in which it's safe for them to do what their nature to do, which is to put things in their mouth and learn about the world that way. Can we set up an environment as a community for our youth, our teenagers, to have a safe, healthy, sacred exploration that does no harm to others, but still allows their nature, which is to experiment? And are there any of us who were ever teenagers who didn't want to explore, experiment? So I think to bridge that gap is to deal with the reality, to realize we love the outlaw in us, the part that wants to explore and experiment and test the limits, go to the moon, and we also love that part of us that cares for ourselves and cares for one another. Thanks.
Great. Yes, Ladies Love Outlaws. Founding fathers of this country were probably criminals fleeing from an oppressive society to come here.
February 22nd is George Washington's birthday. This is intentional. We want to honor the vision of this great founding father of our country. He once said, I now make it my earnest prayer that God would incline the hearts of the citizens to entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another. And finally, that he would most graciously be pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind which are the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion. Without a humble imitation of whose example in these things, we can never hope to be a happy nation. George Washington, in a circular letter to the state governors, expressing his hopes for the future of the United States upon the disbanding of the Revolutionary Army in 1783.